Hello everyone and welcome to chapter number 5, where we will have two short lecture videos, one on apply functions or applying functions to multiple objects, and then we will have a cool video and session on ChatGPT, how to use it, what it is, how to use it in R. Both videos that I will record now as a preparation for the Friday session. We won't look at this in R already. We will do this live on Friday. I think it's better if you are there and can ask your questions and we can go through it together. This will just be two introductory videos. All right, let's start with apply functions and think about this basic setting. Functions, you all know this, we all know this. The functions are really essential in R. We use them constantly. Basically everything that we are doing is applying a function to something, like the ggplot function, mean, mutate. I just put some examples here just to remind you. And usually when we apply functions, we apply them to a cell or, for example, a row or a column of a data frame, or maybe, mostly just a single object, maybe a list or an array. But the question for this intro should now be, what if we want to iterate over cells, columns, rows, or values to apply functions? Well, of course, some more experienced programmers would say, let's write a loop. But R is actually not really the programming language for loops. So I put here without using complex and computation-heavy loops, because in many times the loops don't really work well or actually require a lot of computational power. That's why we have the family of apply functions. And here are just some examples. There are even many more and many more specifications. We have some functions here, like let's say the lapply function. Here you can see what the input should be. You don't need to understand this table fully right now and what the output should be, just to show you that there are a bunch of functions and even many more. But today we want to focus basically on 5 little helpers. These 3 circuit functions: apply, sapply, lapply, and then I added tapply and rowwise. So these 5 functions we will get into a little bit more detail. Let's start with the most basic and also very useful function. It's called apply. And what is its use case? It's a really easy way or a good way to apply functions to columns or rows of an array or matrix in a kind of iterative format. Our output here would be a vector, a matrix, or an array, so it's really flexible what the output should be. And maybe this hasn't been that clear already, so let's look at this nice picture as an example. So as basic syntax, we use the apply function, then we specify our data. As usual, it can be our data frame or some kind of other array. Then we have the margin specification. It can be 1 or 2, or basically 1 or 2 is most important. 1 is if we do something row-wise, and 2 is if we apply the functions column-wise. So you can see here we have specified margin equals 2. So, and our function, we then specify at the last argument, we use the function mean, and we don't need the brackets here, you can see it. So actually what are we doing? We are taking this data and we are applying the mean function to the columns. And you can see this here. They put this nice colored boxes around the columns, and for each column we take the mean. So we can see here we have the mean of the red box or the red column, the orange column, and the yellow column. So that was a really easy way to do this with the apply function. So we applied a function to all of the columns of our data frame or array. All right, little bit more specialized is the so-called lapply function. The name is basically the apply function plus an L, so that explains the name. It's called list apply. And this name is quite self-explanatory. The lapply function is used to apply a function to each element of a list. So we give R a list and say, please apply this function to each list element. And our output, this is important, will again be a list. Basic syntax, even more easy than before. You just type the lapply function, specify the data, which will be a list in this case, and then the function. And then for each element of the list, this function will be applied. For example, you could have 5 numbers in a list, and the function would be to take the square root, and then we will take the square root out of each element and output a list with the square root of each of the initial numbers. We will look at this in our in-person session, and maybe it will be even better to understand. Well, then compared to the sapply function, the S here stands for simplified apply. It's very similar to the lapply function. Again, we apply a function to each element of a list, but our output is, if possible, simplified. So for example, if we take the square root example from before, the lapply function would yield a list, and the sapply function could actually depict these or present these 5 numbers as a vector or a matrix or array. So if possible, sapply simplifies our output, which is quite useful. Basic syntax, don't need to stress this a lot. Again, just the function, give it the data, or in this case the list, and then the function we are interested in. And then the last apply function I want to showcase is tapply. The T stands for table. Table apply can be a little bit misleading. It's used to apply a function to a subset of data based on a grouping factor, right? Experienced R users already think about other functions, how we could solve this. Our output again would be a vector, list, data frame, tibble, so it can be basically everything. It really depends on the input. And the basic syntax, it's now changed a little bit. Of course, the function first, then we give it the data, then we give it the index, and with index we actually mean the variable or the grouping factor that we are talking about. Let's say when we use the Gapminder dataset, we use country or continent as a grouping factor, grouping variable, and here this is called the index. And then ultimately, of course, the function that we want to apply to each of these subgroups. Just 2 more points. It's very similar application like the group by combined with summarize operations. So why would we even need the tapply function? Well, it doesn't require a data frame. You can also give it another object. And the data structure is not really modified. So if we use the group by summarize operations, well, in the end, sometimes we get the tibble as an output and we save it like this. If we use tapply, the data structure is not really modified. So even though group by and summarize is already really powerful, there might be some applications for the tapply function. All right, and the first little helper that doesn't contain the word apply, it's called rowwise. It's part of the dplyr package, so it's part of the tidyverse actually. And its application is to use information from multiple columns within a row. So we have, let's say, a row about me, and we have my test results from 5 different tests. And then we could, for example, take the row-wise sum or mean of my test results. It also ensures the independent treatment of rows, because some of these operations can, of course, also be done with mutate. But mutate per default works as a column-wise function, so it would actually take the column-wise mean or something like that. So if we really want to focus on single rows, which are in a tidy data set or observations, then we can use the row-wise function. Just as an example, I showed you this picture already earlier. So this is how mutate would calculate a mean per default, and we could create a row-wise means or row-wise sum or a row-wise any function with the row-wise function. I told you it's part of the tidyverse, so the syntax is already quite understandable for all of you, of course. It's just plugged into your data wrangling or whatever operation with the pipe, then row-wise, and then pipe again. And then you just continue with, let's say, your mutate function or whatever function that you're currently working on. Well, that was the really small showcase of all of these functions. On Friday, we want to try them out in R. We also want to use ChatGPT in combination, of course, which will be part of the second video. As always, this video was not intended that on Friday I expect you to know all these functions by heart. I just want to showcase some of them to you so that when you're actually searching for a function, you might have already heard about it, you know what to Google. And yeah, so that's basically it for the first video. See you soon in the second video.